Joining me now is Dan Perry, international affairs expert, joins us from Tel Aviv. Dan, thanks very much for joining us. Firstly, we've heard, everybody has heard Zelensky now multiple times asking for support, asking for money, but the criticism being leveled against him and his diplomacy is that why is he not really getting on table with Russia and discussing the war directly with Putin to arrive at a ceasefire as soon as possible, because the reality on the ground is that Russia is very close to now completely taking over Donbass as well.
It's being directed at Zelensky from the Americans and the Americans only, largely. The Russian position right now is that to end the war, maybe, Ukraine has to not only forego the part of Donbass that was occupied by Russia, but also hand over more parts of Donbass, including the fortress cities, pushing way further west into Ukraine than the Russian military has been able to do. And this is something Ukraine obviously is resisting. Now, Trump, more or less, rather clearly, would like Ukraine to sue for peace on Russia's terms. And in Europe, there's great concern that to do any such thing would be to validate and reward expansionist aggression and whet the appetite of Putin to further seek territorial gains in other countries, maybe the Baltics, maybe even further west. This is a very major rupture between the Europeans and the Americans. Zelensky is being very polite in thanking the Americans because the reality is that under Trump in the past year, the American military support and economic support has fallen down to a minimum. And basically, it's about the U.S. selling arms to NATO countries, to Europe, to be given to Ukraine. It remains to be seen where this goes, but a larger meta-narrative here is that there's a major schism between the Europeans and the Americans, and one of the manifestations of it is that Trump not only does not favor democracies over autocracies, but specifically appears to favor Putin over Zelensky.
Dan, 5 European countries coming together accusing Russia of having killed Navalny. But what can these countries or the Europe or the West really do to hold Putin accountable?
Well, I mean, the first thing Europe can do is wean itself of its dependence on Russian natural gas and oil, and they've done a lot of that work in the past couple of years. The other thing that they can do is to become less dependent on the U.S. for strategic issues, in particular for defense, and to start investing in their own defense. In a strange way, Trump's indifference to and even hostility towards Europe has contributed to getting the Europeans to wake up a little bit and do just that. Europe feels like it has a civilizational challenge from Putin and from Russia, and that the Americans are not only under Trump no longer being quite their allies, but also quite potentially preferring Putin. This is a shock to the European system, and the main thing they can do, probably, in addition to investing in their own defense and divesting themselves of dependence on Russia, is probably to project to the American people that there is value for America in being the allies of Europe and the transatlantic alliance that's been a bipartisan consensus in the U.S. for the past 80 years that Trump has abandoned was a good thing. And it brought peace and prosperity and was a good deal for America. Trump presents it as somehow America being suckered by the Europeans. And my personal assessment is that this is a complete falsity. Much attention was paid today on what Marco Rubio said at the Munich Security Conference. And there was an idea that Rubio was one of the normals in the American administration, and he can't possibly believe in the Trumpian narrative of Europe being an unworthy ally. And the reality came somewhere in between. Rubio basically said America wants Europe to be an ally, but suggested very strongly that he wants Europe to be an ally in Trump's terms, and to a certain extent, to be a vassal of the U.S. So he didn't really forswear the narrative that Trump is selling, where Europe is somehow in civilizational decline. He actually doubled down on it. I think we're going to see a period of significant tension between the European Union and the UK together and the United States.
All right, Dan, thanks very much for your perspective here at NewsX World and for joining us.